evening, and we've got a fiscal note prepared. I will share on the screen, walk through.
Oh, Rob Vogel wrote this, Mark. No wonder he looks so good. That's what it says about this.
Okay.
Okay.
For the record, Emily Byrne from the Joint Fiscal Office prepared a fiscal note on S69, an act related to this surcharge on non-primary dwellings as requested. So this bill creates a property tax surcharge on any of 25 cents per $100 of equalized property value on any what's defined in the bill as a non-primary dwelling.
25 cents. What is that in? Is that 2 cents on the tax? What is?
Yeah, no.
No, that sounds too high. It's an addition.
It's an addition. Yes, it's its own thing for only properties that will
So
qualify.
for every
under the
$100, I get 25 cents extra on my bill.
Yes,
So for $1 million house.
I got that table.
Okay, good.
We'll get to that. So it creates this surcharge, and then the revenue from the surcharge is dedicated to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board for the construction of affordable housing. We did an estimate on what this would raise. What we could come up with was between $9 and $21 million, which would probably say that's a huge range. Why 9 to 21? That's almost double. The main challenge with this, and the way that this is outlined, is that the definition of a non-primary dwelling does not currently align with the data that we have in the grant list.
That's what I thought, right?
So we did our best job to try to, we looked at the whole grant list and tried to figure out how we could pull stuff out of the data that is available to try to match up to what a non-primary dwelling might be. Part of the challenge, so the non-primary dwelling definition includes it has to be weatherized with basic amenities or utilities required for a year-round occupancy or use, which is not something that the grand list
Tells you, and
correct.
I don't know, I mean, the appraiser comes in, there's probably an appraisal sheet, which only an appraiser can read, somewhere. But just went through my house, it will probably be 5 or 6 years before they go through. I could turn and I'm wondering, is this an accessory dwelling unit? If I go to Florida for 9 months, but somebody's in my accessory dwelling unit, which is part of my house, because we're out wholesale trying to encourage people to put in accessory dwelling units. So
I'm not sure how it would apply to AUDs.
I don't
That'd be
either.
a good Abby question.
Yeah.
How, if someone has an AUD on their property, how that impacts their.
Or, and most of them are part of the primary dwelling. Accessory dwelling unit.
Oh, ADU, not AUD.
Sorry, yes.
ADU.
Sorry.
Yeah, accessory dwelling unit. But if we succeed in getting a lot more of those, that just, it kind of blurs the line between, if I'm renting that year round, but I don't live here only 5 months.
So I think, again,
I might be renting it to my caretaker, but
the definition does include, right, so if there's a landlord certificate associated, it wouldn't be subject to non-primary dwelling. I don't know where the accessory dwelling units fit into that. And also it says, if it's considered someone's domicile, it's not subject to the non-primary dwelling.
okay, so all those snowbirds that rent to legislators are getting excused.
That was gonna be my question.
Maybe cutting our throats, guys.
So I can walk through a little bit more detail that's in the
Yeah.
fiscal note, if that's
No,
helpful.
those are things we've got to do. They are not the fiscal note.
Yes. So yeah, so section 2, that's where we have the outline of the surcharge itself. Section 1 is the definitions. That's not part of the fiscal note. Section 2 outlines the surcharge itself. Says that the municipalities will be responsible for collecting and remitting to the state the surcharge. And then it also directs the funds to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Trust Fund for affordable housing. Section 3 is amends the Housing and Conservation Trust Fund language to include the non-primary dwelling surcharge. Section 4 amends the education fund statutes to make it explicit that the non-primary dwelling surcharge won't go to the education funds, that it will go elsewhere. And then section 5, the last piece, is the effective dates, which the effective dates are that it goes into effect July 1 of 24 and applicable to the grant list that goes into effect on April 1 of 2024. So about 13 months from now. So some of the considerations that we thought about, as it was a big part of the analysis that we did to try to come up with what the revenue would be, was looking at the data. And I think you want to take more testimony on this, but I think here, I know Jake was supposed to come in last week, but he couldn't because of the weather. We're taking some more testimony from the tax department just in terms of what data they have.
This one, I know there's something coming. I'm assuming everyone has, there was a whole rash, I think the first day this got introduced, on don't touch my one primary dwelling. But a lot of them were renting, some were renting to pay their taxes, and if I hit them with higher taxes, they would move. Others were renting, had bought a house and were renting that house out short term. And I've asked all of them why, without fail, everyone that's gotten back to me said it is our landlord-tenant laws that make it so expensive and difficult to get rid of a tenant. So I think if we're going to penalize them, we need to look at things we might be doing to stop them from doing what we want them to do. So I'm not going to rush this one out. I think it's pretty knee-jerk to say, well, there's empty houses, we'll tax them and we'll build smaller houses. I want to find out why those aren't being rented. Another one said, we're a tourist-based state. And if you don't, somebody asked me, was upset with me about how many Airbnbs that were in Montpelier. It's such a great place to visit, and we should, live in the housing. And I said, well, maybe it's because we don't have any public accommodations to speak of in Montpelier. If you don't do Airbnbs, you might have to have more unsightly hotels or change your whole base economy. But for right now, our base economy is tourism, and they need to stay somewhere. So it's more complicated than that. I'm going to borrow the motto sign from Health and Welfare, which we even had in Spanish.
It's more complicated.
It's more complicated than that. Every time you find something so simple, it's more complicated.
Proposing to change tax policy based on ownership status and what residency status. I'm not opposed to having this further conversation, but I am more interested and intrigued by what I've seen over the House and also my city council role, which is to change tax policy based on land usage. So if we look at, I think of large acre lots connected to city sewer, that's different than high density condos that are using less land on high city sewer. So if we're gonna use tax policy to assess or tweak and drive appropriate land use, I'd be more interested in broadening the conversation.
The housing bill requires, if you've got water and sewer, you've got to allow for 4 units an acre and up to quadruplexes, so 4-unit apartment buildings. That might be work in South Burlington. I think there's some concern it might not work as well in South Barry. So
Property tax rate.
but I think, there's a lot of moving parts here, and rather than move something out without finding out. I'm still trying to figure out, we've got the childcare bill will be coming to us, but the family leave bill is in the other body. But we're gonna have, if we're gonna do them, we have to figure out how to pay for both of them, and I am concerned if one gets here first, it will get funded first, so I'm trying to find out what's going on. Because we'll have to make some really fast decisions that last week. This one I'm not gonna push. I don't think there's a TIF bill coming from the other body. At least in the past, the House has not been as favorably inclined toward, at least Ways and Means towards TIFs as we have. So if I've got to get something complicated out of here, I'm going to work on those mini TIFs, because I don't want, that's too big to stick on unless everybody's agreed, that's just not something I'm going to stick on a miscellaneous tax. It's too big a change. So that's where I'm thinking we're going to spend next week. But we'll find out. Okay.
So yes, I don't know if there's much else in the fiscal note you want me to go through. There's, just a little bit of like, this is what's currently collected in the grand list, and that this non-primary dwelling kind of fits into more than one of those categories, and so there's no real way to tease out.
And there's something in the housing bill on the grand list. What they want to know is how many units of housing there are, and there's a something on the grand list that now it's not a numerical value. They put in something with letters, and the housing bill is trying to change that so we can find out, landed, unlanded, seasonal. And then, there's nothing on there for accessory dwelling units. We're trying to get a count of exactly how many housing units and rental units there are. But I think we found out with the rental registry that some Vermonters are very hesitant to give information about their personal residence to the government. I don't think it's gotten better. I know there was a big brouhaha when 911 went in and people were not telling the government where they lived. You could have my phone number, but you can't. And that's, I'm sure, why 911 is hanging out there as its own separate, apart from the government. They weren't telling you where they lived.
The last piece, well, and so in part of this too, is that to the extent there are 252, right, separate towns that are taking the data and doing their own assessments, they're not necessarily categorizing everything consistently. They're doing, the best that they can, but there's definitely, if you look at, when we dig into the data, there's definitely some inconsistencies in terms of what shows up as residential on the grand list and what doesn't.
We're coming from a state or a region that has elected board of listers that may or may not know anything. I did tax appeals. I knew nothing. My first year is in the Board of Civil Authority. Oh, here's your form. Go out and rate the house. I still haven't seen an above or below average bathroom. I finally figured above average has a sauna and below average is an outhouse. I saw a wide range. They were all average.
And then I think the last piece for consideration just is the effective date of having this in effect by the publication of the next grand list. Really asks every town to go out and figure out, is it weatherized? Is somebody living, all of those sort of details. And have tax department issue guidance on that would be.
Yeah, and I wonder, considering how seldom some of us do appraisals, does anybody actually get in and see if insulation behind that wall.
Yeah.
I kind of doubt it. I think you rely on the taxpayers' veracity to say, no, there's no insulation there. I mean, some of them, it's just the outside wall. Yeah. All right,
The last piece, we just did a little appendix, so I don't forget, as you asked earlier, we just did an analysis on like, okay, 3 property values, we take the non-homestead rate, plus we just took the average municipal tax rate, and then added the non-primary dwelling surcharge, so a house worth 300, sort of in this average town, $350,000 house would see $875 surcharge. The $1 million house would see a $2,500 surcharge.
okay, I got the million right.
Yes. Which is about a 12% change in somebody's property tax.
And the 875, that's a, what was the value of that?
That's just 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Read that at the top of the column.
50.
Okay, so that's, in today's world, that's gonna be a lot of waterfront camps. And some people, I'd say now a fair number of people have probably stuck up some fiberglass insulation. That's gonna hit, I think, more people than, I'm already told that the residents of Lake Carmine are not happy. Is that your district, Senator Brown?
Absolutely is.
A lot of them live in my district. Other than the fact that they think we are somehow responsible for their polluted lake. They have houses that are, for a couple summers, have been virtually unusable. And you can cast blame between the farmers or the 350 houses and the 1 acre of land that qualifies as septic friendly. Who's to blame? But it is. And yeah, putting an $800 surcharge on them.
Yeah, I think that would be grossly unfair,
That,
because in most cases, in that situation, the reason it's vacant is because they can't occupy it because of the pollution.
yeah, well, it's seasonal, so it's not
Well, it's seasonal
occupied
pollution.
year round, yeah.
But to add insult to injury, which is what that is, you need a sarcastic calculator to do that.
Yeah, I mean, so we are gonna, that's where we're gonna end up taking in not just all the rich out-of-staters we wanna get. Every time
I think we
we
should
do
be very
this,
careful with this.
we're gonna pick up a bunch of folks. I know when we did the, what was it, you couldn't cut down trees around a lake. I had, yeah, that one. There were several people that I know who had land they were planning to build their retirement home on it. They now live in Florida because we stopped their ability to build on that plot. So there will be local consequences. I don't know how much, but we'll float it and see some local listers who can tell us. Exactly. All right.
All right, and I think there's just, a few more tables on, right, on the changes, percent changes in someone's property tax rate if they live in a high tax town versus a low tax town. So this is sort of turned on its head, but if your non-primary dwelling was in a municipality with low municipal property taxes and you add a 25% charge on it, it's a big percent change in your
So
property
if
tax rate.
you've got a camp up in the kingdom and you come and spend a couple of summers there from South Texas where it's hot, and you come up there for 4 months of the year but it's on a class 4 road and it just gets shut up for the winter, you're going to see a 15.64% increase in your property taxes.
Awesome. I mean, I think the definition is gotta be weatherized, so if yes,
Okay,
it's
yeah,
weatherized.
but there's also class 4 roads, it's not plowed.
Yeah.
So we at least need to get that in, because the housing bill makes it the law that you have to disclose that it's a class 4. People that come from out of state don't know about class 4 roads. It goes in with snow tires.
Not until they've completed the transaction.
That's right. No, if you use a realtor and we don't disclose it's a class 4 road, we probably lose our license.
All right, and that's everything. The tax department did do a report on sort of data around secondary residences in 2021. For more information, but that's all that I've got.
Okay. And we've got that on our website, so we can click in and read.
Yep.
That data. All right. So Senator Rahm,
Yes, sorry.
this is the tax on non-primaries.
Surcharge, but yes.
It's a surcharge, but it will, if you're in a low tax town, so if you're in the kingdom, it will result in a 15.34% increase in your property tax.
Great.
Rate.
If you're in a high tax town, it's only an 8% increase in your rate, so.
Better to do it through the whole rate system.
I
Like add
don't
something on
know.
top. Oh, you don't know? Okay.
Well, I'm not gonna rush this one out because I've got a house bill.
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't
It's
think.
not gonna do,
Yeah,
but it gets really
but
complicated.
it needs to be very
Lake
thoughtful.
Carmi isn't in your district, is it?
I mean, I don't know. Yes, it's not.
Yes, it's
Um,
not. Those folks can't use their season or some of them are probably pretty well insulated, but they can't use them because the water stinks.
Interesting.
So we're going to tax them higher when they can't use their house at all.
What I do remember from my time on Ways and Means is there's nothing simple and it
No.
affects every single household differently. So I didn't expect this one to move quickly.
It won't. I think this one, we've got one, I want to look, or have you look at landlord tenant, because
Okay.
everyone I've asked, so why aren't you doing a long-term rental? They'll say to me pretty much, are you crazy? It takes too much time and it costs too much money
Mm-hmm.
to get a bad tenant out.
Mm-hmm. No,
And
we're,
so
yeah.
you know, I get a week,
process.
yeah, I get a week with a bad tenant.
Mhm.
They have no rights. I can have the cops down and have them hauled out.
They do, if they get a short-term rental for longer than a month, they have rights, but it looks very different, the
Yeah.
agreement that they've
Yeah.
signed up for.
And again, like Act 250, it may not be true in all circumstances, but
Mhm.
the belief amongst the people
Right,
is that that's the way it is. And as long as that's the belief, that's what they're acting.
right,
So we need to change a belief system.
yeah, a
Good
lot of
luck.
complex stuff.
Okay, thank you, Emily. This is the fun stuff. Now we're on insurance. And I guess I know the folks with the amendment,
They're all out.
they're out there, yeah.
Emily.
But I think, I know it's been 5 weeks or so since we went over this early. But we probably should just do like a 2,000-foot walkthrough, because there was some give and take between you and Emily.
There's been a little bit of,
The tweaking.
yeah,
So it might be helpful just to tell us what you did, and then we'll hear about the amendment. And, thank you. Hey, these are at least from my district. We're good. Not the 100, how many emails did you get?
About 603 so far.
Nice.
on S5.
Uh-huh,
You might be winning.
I think you are.
none, and I think I found 2 for my county.
I'm not sure that there's actually 603 people placing those calls.
Okay,
That's my
let's see, yeah, this thing is taking forever to load again, and Shai will, we got 5 things up here. He'll tell me it's all my fault, but let's try this again.
Maybe while you're doing that.
Yes,
I will
I'll try to get it to
introduce
load if
myself.
it's not.
Maria Royal with Legislative Council. And so I actually came a little bit more prepared to talk about the proposed amendment, to S95, which is the VFR bill. You are absolutely right that I've been, since the bill was introduced, the omnibus DFR housekeeping bill, which has a number of banking and insurance provisions in it. I have been having conversations with VFR about the biggest chunk of it, which is the Guarantee Association joining health and life, HMO guarantee into one entity. And so not a huge substantive change to Vermont law, but creating one new entity that encompasses 2 separate entities. And so the back and forth has been just trying to get that language technically right and very minor changes. So we're just finalizing that now, and I'll go over those as soon as that's
Yeah,
done.
walk us through those.
But I won't do that right now because I haven't quite finalized, but I will, if that's okay with you. I can try to do it from memory, but I don't think I'll do a very good job. However, at the end of maybe this presentation of another amendment that you have in front of you, I can then get quickly up to speed on the other language and wrap that up today if you want to move on. So I will plan on doing that. But in terms of this new proposal, which I believe you all have hard copies of, and it's posted online.
Okay.
This is, yep, you should, yep. So this is for your consideration. I spoke with Senator Cummings, and she's gonna offer this before the committee to consider. And this is a proposal that comes originally from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston. And this is a government-sponsored institution that lends money primarily to banks and insurance companies. Their members are the banks and insurance companies, and there are several in Vermont, many in Vermont, actually, that benefit from low-cost lending from this institution. It's a regional bank. So, and just giving you a little bit of context before we just jump into the details. So, as I understand it, under federal banking law, the banks are required to only give secured loans to their members. And then they have other provisions that pertain to what happens in the event of an insolvency of a bank or an insurance company that's been lended money. So the provisions here are to amend Vermont's delinquency laws to cover the insolvency of an insurance company and to make them consistent with how banks are, who receive funds from the regional bank are treated in the event of a delinquency proceeding. So, and the hope, well, I don't want to speak, I neither support nor oppose the proposal, but the interest is by making these tweaks here, that Vermont companies, Vermont insurance companies will be able to secure better terms for their loans from the federal regional bank. Does that make sense? Like that, so that's the part of the impetus for the proposal here. So we'll just talk about what the changes are. And then maybe just a general discussion of things that you may want to consider as you hear from the stakeholders who are all in right now. So again, these are all changes that come within chapter 145, which is again the chapter on rehabilitation, supervision, rehabilitation, and liquidation of insurers. And the two substantive provisions, the first one, which is section 7033, concerns injunctions and orders if there's a proceeding, if there's a delinquency proceeding. And what the proposal seeks to do, if you look at page 2 of the amendment.
Okay, you're on the amendment.
I'm on the amendment.
I haven't
Yep.
gotten the bill to load on my.
Oh, you do? Okay. Okay, sorry to like switch gears then.
No,
Yeah.
the,
Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm looking at now.
Yeah.
So normally, once a proceeding starts, the commissioner takes over as the receiver and all of their transactions kind of come to a halt, right? So there's an opportunity to see what kind of assets there are, what the claims are, but things come to a halt. So to ensure that those assets are protected. So in page 2, in subsection C, you'll see there's a new language there. So in general, as part of that stop everything, the commissioner taking over the insolvent or might be in rehabilitation, but an insurance company in financial trouble, it prohibits all kinds of transactions from happening. And then there is a statute that says if there are any proceedings against an insurer, there has to be an automatic stay. Like they are discontinued, they come to a halt for about 90 days. The proposal here is specific to any secured loans from the regional bank. And you'll see that, I'll just read the first sentence. Notwithstanding sections A and B of the section, which is a section that says stop everything. Also, subsection 7054A of this title, that's the provision that says there's a stay for 90 days on any claims against the insurance company or policyholder, or any other contrary provisions in the chapter. No person for more than 10 days shall be restrained, stayed, enjoined, or prohibited from exercising or enforcing any right or cause of action against any pledged security, credit, collateral, loan. Basically, what this is doing for the secured loans from the Federal Home Loan Bank, it's saying that they can get their collateral within 10 days as opposed to waiting for the full 90-day period of time. So they can go in and they can collect their collateral, which is what they're required to do under federal law in order to give really good terms in any loan. So that's part of the proposal here. And in subsection D, this all pertains to if there's a redemption request made by the insured, the bank, the regional bank, will repurchase any of the outstanding stocks that it has. And then there's some specific requirements about that. And then the regional bank, the Federal Home Loan Bank will, I'm now on subsection E on page 3, will work with the commissioner, who's the receiver, to come up with a plan regarding that collateral that they've used to secure the loan. So there's a process there. And then the other substantive change in this whole chapter, again, specifically just concerning insolvencies or delinquencies, there's a provision in law that will void any transfers if they're fraudulent. So before you file the petition for rehabilitation, if you transferred money to benefit some creditors over others, the commissioner has the ability to void those transfers. So there's an exception proposed here that notwithstanding that, that voiding provision would not apply to loans secured by the Federal Home Loan Bank. And then the same similar provision on section 12 on page 6 of the bill. It's very similar language. If there are any preferences for some of the lien holders that are fraudulent or intend to harm other creditors, the commissioner has the ability to void those transactions as well. And this is just saying that that provision does not apply to the federal home loan banks loans. So that's basically the proposal. I'm sorry if that wasn't so clear. I realized as I'm going through it that it was pretty technical, and
folks from the federal
so you'll hear better about the description
about
of
what this means to them. So
Yes.
this is an amendment to the general insurance statute. It's not a
Correct.
change to the housekeeping bill. We're being
all new
asked-
sections. No, these are all new provisions.
to add to it.
The
Okay.
request is for these changes to the chapter that covers the insolvencies of Vermont insurers, so that the members who borrow money from the federal home loan bank can borrow on better terms, lower interest rate, whatever. So that's generally the proposal. The only other thing I'll mention, and you'll hear from the department obviously, is the one thing that sprang to mind that I don't have a position on, but something for you to consider, is if there is an insolvency for most insurers, life, health, whatever, there's usually a guarantee association that protects the policy holder, so that all the insurance companies pay in, and then there's some protection in the event of insolvency. Some of the members that would be accessing these loans are risk retention groups, and they might be licensed as a captive. They don't have a guarantee association. So I think there's just a general question of, these favorable lending provisions versus are there any risks to policyholders that they somehow might not be able to have their claims covered in the event they have. So that's just big picture to think about, and I can't answer that question, but.
Okay, well, I think I'm gonna have Jamie and Joanne and whoever you'd like to do it with you, and then Emily. Well, I think I'd like Maria to take like just a section by section, that, just to refresh our memory. That's what this section does, that's what this section does. Just go through it, is just to remember it, and if there's been any changes since we saw it originally. We didn't see it originally, I think we saw it draft on the screen. And then just, you can comment on this proposal and just give us a brief explanation of what changes got made. That's okay, to the guarantee system. Okay, all right.
Thanks, Ed.
I'll just say, just very briefly, sort of set the table, if that's all right. Jamie Veen on behalf of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston.
Pull a second chair off too.
I want you guys to hear from the experts, they're the ones who know this. Ray did a fantastic job of providing context, which was I was going to try to do, but what you have in front of you is some language that the FHLB of Boston has worked on and has received input from DFR, and so they can describe for you exactly what the proposal is, what they've been doing similarly in other states, and how this is already in place in federal law. With me today is Joanne Sullivan of FHLB Boston and Matt Stewart. Joanne will do the bulk of the comments. But Matt is available, obviously, if there are any questions that pop up as well. Joanne has a PowerPoint that she'll go through. It's under my name, I think, on the committee page. So if you're looking for it, but she also has hard copies that we can send around.
Hard copies, or we can put it up on the screen.
No, I've got some testimony separately from that, but this is
Okay,
also
that
helpful as
hard
background.
copies.
If people would like.
So with that, I'll
This
just,
committee is a hybrid, half high and half,
Have that, have not.
except when the computer won't upload the bill.
Right, well, that tends to happen. Okay.
And just ask you to introduce yourself to the record, who you represent, and then I think it might be helpful to start with what problem are we trying to solve?
Well, here are some Here are my copies if you would like, so let me share those here. And this is what is supposed to be up on the screen, and it is good, okay?
Okay.
First of all, I'm Joanne Sullivan. I'm Vice President Director of the Federal Bank of Boston. And we are one of 11 regional Federal Home Loan banks chartered by Congress in 1932. Banks, credit unions, insurance companies, and community development financial institutions located in the 6 New England states can be members of ours. They can join as a member. The Boston Bank currently has 425 members, including 29 in Vermont. One of the things we're trying to do here is to equalize treatment of our banks and our insurance company members with that of banks and credit
Can
unions.
you tell us what is a federal home loan bank as opposed to one of Chris Delia's banks here in Vermont?
All of
Just a regular one.
All of which are members of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston, of course. Well, you know what? Let me go through some
Okay.
aspects of the testimony, which will give some background on the Federal Home Loan Banks, because that's always.
We haven't done any work on banks in quite a while in here.
That's
Mr.
okay.
Delia is smiling very happily. We haven't messed
We're all
with
good.
Well,
We haven't messed with banks.
Yeah, we're very good. We are a government-sponsored enterprise, so which means we are cooperatively structured and owned by our members. We are wholesale banks. We provide highly reliable wholesale funding to our members to support housing finance and community development. In order to access our funding, members must pledge collateral, which primarily consists of residential loans or securities backed by residential loans. And members can then liquefy in turn these residential mortgage assets by pledging them to support their Federal Home Loan Bank borrowings, the money that they take and borrow from us, which we call advances. They can use the proceeds from these borrowings for further lending in their communities. And in this way, through our member institutions, we support housing finance and the local economy. Our GSE status, our government-sponsored enterprise status, enables us to borrow funds in global capital markets at very attractive rates, and then we can pass on the benefit of the low-cost funds to our members by making loans to them on narrow margins. Having access to this source of liquidity helps our insurance company members as well manage their balance sheets more efficiently and build capital to protect policyholders. We've historically been able to maintain access to these global capital markets and continue lending to our members across any kind of business cycle, including times of economic and market stress. So we serve as a stabilizing force in the economy. We also have a track record of working closely with insurance and banking regulators of financially weak members, which is rare. And we can continue in that way to make funding available to help keep these members functioning while the regulators work to establish an orderly process if needed for resolution or rehabilitation. And in this way, we can help protect the consumers or policyholders of the struggling member from the uncertainty and confusion that can result from what can sometimes be a sudden chaotic collapse of an insurance company, a bank, or credit union. We are heavily regulated because we're a GSE, and we're only permitted, as Ria mentioned, to advance funds to our members on a fully secured basis. Because of the disparities in federal banking law and state insurance law, and concern over those disparities on the part of our regulator, our credit posture has to be more conservative towards insurance company members than to our banking and credit union members. A central reason for the disparity that Vermont insurance law doesn't provide the same protections that federal banking law does to our insurance company members. I'll give an example. Vermont insurance law gives the receiver and the court powers to settle insolvent insurance companies' affairs, which could result in us as a secured creditor being subject to a stay of injunction, delaying our statutory right to resort to its collateral. We could also be subjected to the voidable transfer provisions that Maria described earlier, and that would also be a challenge to our secured position. We don't face these types of risks when we lend to bank and credit union members in Vermont because they're regulated on the federal level versus our insurance company members, which are regulated on the state level. So what we're trying to do here is equalize this treatment with this amendment. So then we can equalize our approach to lending to insurance company members at more attractive rates than we do now. This change would also make us more able to continue to provide funding, and this is important, to an insurance company member in a declining financial condition because we would work together with the receiver, in this case, the DFR. And this again would benefit policyholders by helping to stabilize the insurance company, possibly avoid receivership, and if not, at least facilitate an orderly resolution, a rehabilitation of this insurance company. I'll also mention that we certainly have been, as Maria suggested, or mentioned rather, in direct conversation with the Department of Financial Regulation, and we've incorporated their suggestions into the language of this amendment. The legislation has become law in 23 states, which is up there in a beautiful map somewhere. I also want to add that the American Council of Life Insurers supports this legislation, and the reason is that it will strengthen their members, their insurance company members, by providing them with better access to federal home impact funding. So I thank you for your consideration and your thoughtfulness in this amendment, and I hope that the committee will support the addition of S95.
Senator Chipman, it's probably more your alley, but go for it.
Did the federal laws change at some time in the relatively recent past, that is, the states are slowly aligning, that you're showing on this map?
No, this is something that has always been in effect, and our regulator, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, over the past few years has been pushing the 11 federal home regs a little more to work with the states within their districts to try to get this legislation passed, because it is that disparity. It isn't really due to a change, it's just due to something that it's very rare for an insurance company or a member insurance company to find itself in this position. But in the case of rarity, which schools out, if you're an insurance company, obviously, you want to make it absolutely clear how we would work with the receiver if that should ever happen.
Okay, so right now, if an insurance company goes into receivership, everything shuts down. All right, and you may have made a loan to that insurance company, and in return, they give you collateral, which you said is usually a real estate. Okay, I'm still separating in my mind. Banks sell mortgages all the time, usually to other banks. But an insurance company, I pay them a premium. They take my money, they invest it, and so if their investments don't keep up with their payouts, then they have financial difficulties, and, all right. So what you would, but everything is frozen. I guess what I'm trying to visualize is why you would need to be able to get your collateral out. Is it because you have loaned them money just before they went into receivership and you need your collateral? Or is it because if you could get collateral, you could loan them money, I'm being very simple, I'm sure, but to help them get into a more stable financial position?
Yes, that's a short and simple way of describing it. We are only required to, the only way that we can lend is if that collateral is secured, so we must have access to it if we need to at all times. However, what would usually happen in this situation is that we as a company would work directly with the receiver, or in this case, the DFR, on the on an orderly transition, whatever that may be. During that transition, if the DFR says to us, we're in a position where the Federal Home Bank can loan to that insurance company, continue to do what it needs to do, whether make policyholders whole or other creditors whole, we would be able to do that, working closely together.
But you would have to get your collateral out. So, okay, so that's the rock in the hard place. You could perhaps help in a financial package which could get this company out of receivership, but you, by law, can't do that unless you get collateral.
Right. That's correct.
And by our law, you can't get your collateral until they're out of receivership. Is that, I'm usually very simple. Is that where it's going?
You want to add something?
Well, I'm just gonna say is,
My colleague asked you.
we need to know that the collateral is there. And so if there's a stay and we're not able to access it. Now, the fact that we have this legislation, it's not gonna mean that we're gonna grab this collateral. What it means is that we know that by regulation, we have to be safe and secure. And so that if we know that we're not gonna be stayed, have a stay in place, that will allow us to continue to work with this insurance company. There's two examples of where this happened. I don't know if you
Okay,
have-
that might be helpful.
Sure.
Several members of this committee are new, so
Yeah,
insurance is a large black hole.
so there's two examples, Standard Life, which was in Indianapolis,
Oh, you
and
got
then
it.
Shenandoah, which is in Virginia. Both of these went into receivership. One was in 2009, and shortly thereafter, 2010. The Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta and the Federal Home Loan Bank of Indianapolis worked with the receivers that were appointed. Two of them were outside appointments. They worked with them. They had outstanding loans with the Federal Home Loan Bank. The Federal Home Loan Bank continued to lend to them. They did not call the loans. They continued to work with them. And they knew that there was a secure because they were working in partnership. So what this legislation does is gives us a similar pattern where we know that there's security there, that we can continue to operate. And in both of those, they were fully rehabilitated. Shenandoah Life is still Shenandoah Life down in Virginia. And then Standard Life is now part of Guggenheim Life. And so both of those were successful rehabilitations. And what you're going to find is the bank, the Federal Home Loan Bank, is going to be interested in rehabilitating. These are members. We're a co-op structure. So the idea is to continue that relationship. We're not a retail bank where we're trying to pull money for profitability. That's not how we operate. We're here created by Congress to help insurance companies and banks. And so by those two examples, you can see that the Federal Home Bank is working towards a common goal with the receiver and the insurance company. And the other thing is, these are rehabilitations. When you get to a liquidation, I think that's where you're talking about the guarantee fund and things that, and hopefully we never get to that point, because remember, we're high credit. We're not going to be dealing with the lower tier of insurance companies as well. So you're going to be dealing with the bigger.
Okay, you're not dealing with fly-by-night insurance. And your job is to help them access capital.
Liquidity and capital, correct. Same. All right.
No, that's okay. I couldn't remember the names of the two insurance. I have it right here.
Committee questions. Okay. Emily, do you want to come up and talk to us about DFR's position on?
Sure, it's brief.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I don't understand this well enough to answer.
I'm.
I feel like I'm trying to read Beowulf here.
Oh, wow.
The original
Yeah, so
ones,
it's-
yes.
You want us to give us a little more update what the banks are?
The chair asked early on, what's the problem you're asking us to solve?
So remember in context, that we were created by Congress to facilitate housing and community investment. We were created during the Depression. So if you think back of what that situation was, there wasn't any liquidity in the markets. So the banks were created to be able to pull liquidity from the international debt markets. So we go out, we have an office of finance, and we're about $1 trillion bank system. We expand and contract based on the members' needs of liquidity. And so without us, there's problems in certain cycles. If you go back to 2008, 2009, we tripled in size because there was no place to get funding. And if you look at the first week of March 2020, we added $20 billion to insurance balance sheets immediately within a couple of days. So we were created to allow wholesale funding to provide to these insurance companies and banks. So we added a huge value for their operations and be able to, so if you think of, let's say a risk retention group, I know that came up.
Yeah.
Let's say they have a reinsurance contract that they're not going to get paid for 3 months. So what they can do, let's say it's a $20 million payment from the reinsurance company. Maybe they borrow from us that 20 million instead of liquidating their balance sheet at unfavorable terms. So you think of their securities that they're holding, they would have to go out to market and sell those, and more than likely they'd have capital loss or something, depending on the market situation, or they'd take a profit that they didn't want to take. So they can come to us and say, all right, we're going to use you for the liquidity of $20 million for this 3-month gap. And so you think of when they have large cash payments or whatnot, so they use us to sort of buffer and keep that balance sheet managed. And they also use us for interest rate risk. And so as they look at extending or shortening durations, they can come to us, use our funding to help with their strategy, whether it's financial or investment. Yes.
Would you characterize your intention in your role in this government function is to keep these insurance companies afloat, to rehabilitate them so as to avoid collapse or otherwise bankruptcy?
Yes, that would be the #1.
And this makes it easier.
And always working with the receiver of the regulator.
Because if you remember, created by Congress, our intention is to help our members. And so we're there to help, and we're not, when I think of a retail bank, or I shouldn't say retail bank, or somebody who's for profit, that's not the way we operate. And so we're going to look out for the best interest of our members.
Okay, so insurance companies and banks join you. Do they choose, or do you choose? I assume there's a vetting process.
It's purely voluntary.
It's voluntary. And I assume they probably pay something to join you, but then you are kind of their backstop, where if things start to get a little shaky, you have access to capital, which they might need. 2008, 2009 were interesting years in banking and insurance.
Yeah.
Everybody just wanted to get through and not collapse, and not, if you collapse, there's some risk depending on how big the collapse is.
Sure.
To policyholders or people on the street. So you're there kind of as the stopgap. And I think in the Depression, we had banks failing and everything just going away overnight and people's money going away. So you're there kind of as that backstop. So that when something, an investment doesn't work out the way they think it will, but they got another one, but you carry them through until that next investment, so they don't perhaps have to sell off something at below market rate.
That would be one way to
Yeah, I
describe it.
remember with the bond market.
Right, but again,
I'm
in
an
order
exact board.
to belong, in order to borrow from us, first of all, in order to belong, you need to pledge a certain amount of very specific collateral.
Yeah.
Statute. On top of that, you pledge a certain amount of what we would call activity collateral, let's say, against which you can borrow. So there was always plenty of collateral, even a little bit more than you can borrow. So it's always secured in that way. So you're not randomly borrowing, you're borrowing against what you've already pledged.
What you've already pledged, okay, so you've
Very
already
basic.
pledged collateral, which I assume means you can't use that collateral you pledged in daily activity. I'm trying to figure out, right now, an insurance company goes into receivership, or a bank, but banks are under federal regulation, and that's okay. Goes into receivership. DFR steps in, they take over, and their job is to rehabilitate. Your job is to be part of that rehabilitation.
Right.
Right now, because everything is frozen for 9 months. Is that what I remember? Everything is frozen. All the assets, all the collateral, nothing can happen for 9 months. So, but in order for you to come in and be part of this, you need to know that you can get the collateral they've already pledged out immediately, so that you can be part of this rehab. I got that,
You did, just one clarification, it's 90 days.
90 days, okay. And you want it down to 30 or just, no,
Yes.
10? Okay,
But that's the ability to. So,
okay.
And this is actually, the 10 days actually, the legislation that has been passed in the other 23 states, that period of time varies from 0 to 10. So 10 is actually,
We're
10 is a
cautious.
bit more long, but that's perfectly fine. No, I'm just simply saying that there is a stay in other
But it
states.
just delays the present situation, delays your ability to act quickly.
It would,
And acting quickly to rehabilitate a failing insurance company before you have to go into the trusts and start, bailing it out. Yeah, the guarantee funds would be beneficial to everybody.
and let me just add, so you were saying that when it comes to receivership, our practice has been to work with the DFR over the years. We've met with Emily's team, predecessors on a regular basis. We try and keep that relationship so that as we monitor insurance companies, it's not a surprise that they go into receivership. And so we would want to work with the DFR on a regular basis to be prepared for that. And we would work closely. So if we became an insolvent state with an insurance company, we would look to the DFR for advice and guidance on how we would treat that. But knowing that we would have that ability to get that collateral, if had to be, would allow us to continue the operation and the ability to lend. Which if we didn't have that, then by regulation, we couldn't do anything. And would put the insurance company probably on a faster spiral.
Okay. And I'll leave it to Emily to ask, but would the downside of this be that then that collateral might not be available to DFR? What's the downside of doing this? So why don't you come on up, we'll switch seats.
Sure. And also Deputy Commissioner Brown is on the screen.
Okay, there's Commissioner. She's coming in, there she is. Okay, so I will leave it to Commissioner Brown. I can't do Deputy Commissioner, it's too big a mouthful.
I don't want to be the commissioner, so.
Okay. We'll call you Emily.
Perfect.
Just give us DFR's position on this.
So I'm actually going to defer to Emily Kosicki as the Director of Policy.
Whoever wants to talk, come up and take the hot seat.
thank you.
Okay, I'm trying to see, is there another side to the story and what is it if there is?
So Emily Kosicki, Director of Policy for DFR, for the record. To start, wanted to thank the Federal Home Loan Bank for reaching out and working with us on the language. This is a model that they are using among the states. And so they approached us with that language and have worked with us over several months and made changes based on our feedback. Including that more conservative timeline of 10 days. And so we appreciate that. And our position is neutral. We understand, the need for this and that it may provide some benefits for insurance company members. We also took a cue from the NAIC who reviewed this as a potential NAIC model some years ago. I think it was around 2012, 2013. They worked closely with the Federal Home Loan Banks at that time on the language. And so, the model that's being used and is being discussed here is based on that collaboration with the states through the NAIC. The NAIC did not adopt it as an official NAIC model at the time, and didn't support or oppose it as a model, but did come to a place where they felt the language was acceptable. And so that's really where we took our cue. We have some attorneys in our general counsel's office who are experts in insolvencies and bankruptcy and would be far better equipped to speak to the risks than me, but we did get to a place where we felt like we were comfortable with the language as it is. I think, Emily, I don't know if you have anything to add about potential risks that we saw, but.
No, Emily Brown, Deputy Commissioner of Insurance. I honestly am not, this is not my area of expertise, but I actually don't really feel comfortable speaking to the downsides. I mean, something that was mentioned was that capital is then removed from the receivership. So I think that could be a downside, but I think if you wanted more details, I would just defer to my other colleagues in the general counsel's office who, like Emily said, are the experts in this area.
Okay. So if we don't do this, I guess we're getting into, nobody's saying it's, it's important enough that it should be a national model law, which is what NAIC says. I'm sure it was when insurance companies were failing like crazy in the early 2000s. But that's straightened out. So I guess I'm not really enthused about doing something that DFR is kind of warm about, but I'm trying to figure out the downside if we do this is that a certain amount of collateral is removed from the negotiating process. That, if the home loan bank has access to that, it's not available to DFR to do something else with. But so that's if we do it. If we don't do it, it means that the home loan banks can't come in and do as much as they could if we loosened up that collateral.
My understanding of it is that if we don't do it, the Federal Home Loan Bank is potentially less able to offer favorable terms to insurance company members in Vermont. And I understand that, that could be part of their review process with their regulator that affects that. If we do it, then yes, I think part of the risk is they could access some of that collateral, sooner, and it's less available in the insolvency process. That said, our understanding is that in the rare situation that this were to occur, that they would work with us proactively. But that is my understanding that that's the risk, yeah.
I hope I can assume that this is all kind of speculative and vague because we don't have insurance companies go into receivership frequently.
It's rare, very rare, yes.
Yeah, good, that makes me feel better. So there's risk on both sides. I mean, and I'm assuming that every receivership, is unique and needs its own special workaround. And yeah.
If we don't do this, they'd still ultimately likely have access to the collateral of the capital entity. It'll just take them longer, more costly, and your time in these complex scenarios is very expensive. So if anything, what we're doing is reducing the cost of that potential risk when these things occur by giving you straightforward, clearly defined rights to that collateral. Thus, then they price that by a little better terms for your members.
Yeah, that's correct. I was going to add that as well. So we have access to this by law. We have the legal right to it. It's just a delay, as you mentioned. So that's the big piece with that.
So if you have legal right to it, then we really couldn't use it for something else, right?
Again, if that
Yeah,
particular question, I need to pull in one of our bankruptcy experts for a concern, or an insolvency expert for that concern. I think it's a timing issue.
Maybe we should delay and let you get your, see if your bankruptcy people want to send us if they've got a big red flag, they should tell us. I have a feeling it's light pink at best.
I am happy to follow up. I will say that there were no major objections or concerns from DFR. We just weren't comfortable moving beyond a neutral position just because of the nature of the language.
Because you're gonna be the people on the ground when this comes up.
Yeah,
All right.
there were no major red flags or concerns after the conversations we've been having with Federal Home Loan Bank and some of the adjustments they
They're not
made.
fly-by-night people.
Correct, correct.
Okay. Mr. Delia, would you like to say something about home loan banks?
Sure, I'd be happy to. For the record, Chris Delia, President, Vermont Bankers Association. Obviously, insurance is way out of my bailiwick.
Yes, but you also,
But-
you deal with them on the other side when banks are.
That's correct, Madam Chair. And for as long as I've been with the association, 20 years, I've known the folks at the Home Loan Bank and their operations. They are an outstanding group to work with, not only providing liquidity, but I'll also give a shout out to their economic development programs and their housing programs that work with many entities in the state of Vermont. And they've just done a great job over the years. So a very high quality.
From Hinsdale when we need her.
Right, a high quality, trustworthy organization, highly regulated. So I absolutely trust what they're asking for here and hope you can support it.
Okay. Okay, committee, thoughts?
Makes sense to me, ish.
Senator Brock, you wanna?
The only thing, the notion of hearing from the experts in DFR and my fundamental questions to them is what could go wrong and what's the likelihood of that happening?
Okay, so maybe we'll just get them to come through quickly. I'm unfortunately, I'm doing some kind of a community forum on Wednesday, so on Tuesday, so maybe we'll try and get you, see when your folks can zoom in.
Sure.
And we'll just set this up for 10 or 15 minutes sometime next week. I don't think it's gonna be an issue, but I think it would be good to hear from the attorneys and then go.
I would benefit from Cliff Notes. You look like you don't know what Cliff Notes are.
I absolutely know.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to, I'm gonna ask Maria to walk us through the housekeeping bill, just section by section. Mostly, because we haven't looked at it for a while and I'm going to have to report it. I could use it, I walked through. Thank you for coming up from Boston.
Happy to
Safe
provide
drive
more,
home.
happy to provide more information, including Cliff's notes, I'm really good.
I think we're just, this is belts and suspenders.
The insurance industry really likes those. Thank you very much. No, yes, thank you for your time.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right, this thing is not loading again. Where's shot? It's not. Okay, let's see if I can get it on the last one. Maria, under you, I have 95 is introduced. Is that the one, that's the version after all the give and take? with-
Not quite, because they haven't been officially gone through this processing, but I can tell you what the changes are. You can refer to that document and I'll point you
Okay,
to where the
so
changes
just,
are.
yeah, just walk us through and then we aren't gonna get this out right away. If you have time, if you can get me a
I will
section
do
by
section by
section.
Yep, and I can work with
Somebody-
Emily on that and get you all squared away so that it goes
Yes.
smoothly.
To keep my thoughts unless somebody else will present this.
71 pages. Thank you.
I thought it was like 45, up to 71. Okay, yeah, it says 71, so not to worry, they'll all go to sleep. So what have we got?
Okay, so in terms of, first, quickly, we can just review the Guarantee Association.
Yeah,
Because that's where there are changes to the bill that's posted online. So it starts on page 5 of the bills introduced. That's 95.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so you'll see the short title, this chapter shall be known and decided as the Vermont Life and Health Insurance Guarantee Association. So there are only 6 very minor amendments, and we'll go through them really quickly. So the first one is.
And these aren't really amendments.
Just revisions,
These are revisions, but
revisions.
these are in the bill as it was introduced.
This is the bill's
So
introduced.
this, okay, so these are not amendments.
Correct,
What we
only
just
if,
did would be that would be the first amendment if we,
let me clarify. These are not in the bills introduced, what you're looking at. However, if you want to make these edits that I'm gonna go through, which are just technical amendments.
Yeah.
Then they would have to be part of a committee amendment to S95, because S95 was introduced, you can't change anything now. These are all
okay, so
about
we
revisions.
would amend the bill as introduced.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is the
Yep.
first place that we would have to amend.
So, yep, and these are all pretty minor, just further kind of clarifications to get the language right, because this was pretty technical. It's about 60 pages of the bill pertaining to this Guarantee Association. So on page 9 of the bill is introduced. There are actually 2 amendments in subdivision B1, which is on line 11. You'll see it says, this chapter shall provide coverage to a person specified in subsection A of this section for a policy or contract of direct non-group life insurance, health insurance, and then that next phrase, including health maintenance, organization, subscriber contracts and certificates. Just a very technical change, wanting to specify that for purposes of this chapter, that health insurance
Okay,
includes
so as
HMOs.
we've got this presented, I'm assuming what's underlined is change to current law. And we are, this one phrase in there is a change from the bill
As
as
introduced.
So we
Yes,
will
this is
need
all
to be
new
able to
law.
break that out.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely should explain it because it's different from what the members have seen.
Okay. I'm
Yep.
sure they've all read it.
And then, just continuing, just moving a section, you'll see on line 14, it says, and supplemental policies or contracts to any of these.
Okay, Maria, I think it might be easier if we just started on one.
Or you want to just review the whole thing?
And just, yeah, because we went through this before it got introduced, so we were working on DFR's draft. But I wanted to get through it because we didn't have any other bills at that point. But now that we've got a draft,
Okay, okay.
and Jill, can you print me a copy? I can't mark up that copy.
Okay.
But I'm gonna, yeah, and I can't do markups.
Okay.
I can't do,
upstairs.
okay, because I can't do markups on,
Yeah, so I apologize, I didn't realize that you wanted to go through the whole bill, I would have brought my laptop, pulled it up on the screen, given you hard copies or
Well,
whatever.
that's
you need, so.
fine. I think we
Understand.
went through this once, but it's been a while.
Yes, and
And
Emily, can-
just before we vote anything out, I think we should
Sure.
refresh our minds.
Yes. and I invite Emily to participate, to explain, these are all
Yeah, the
proposals from the
Emily,
department.
come up.
So the first section, section 1, this pertains to captive insurance companies and when they can take credit for any reinsurance of their risks. And there is, you'll see, it's just a correction of a cross-reference
All right,
on line 14, right? So, and also on line 17. So that's a technical change in the captive insurance section. Section 2. this provision, this section of law generally concerns data security practices for insurance companies.
Okay.
Again, a technical change on line 7. So this is specifying here what a licensee is for purposes of this chapter, what insurance companies are required to have these data security practices. And then it lists A through C entities that are not included, that do not need to comply with these data security standards. And that this is existing law, captive insurance company, captive insurance company, a purchasing group, or risk retention group. And then in C is where the change is, a licensee domiciled in a jurisdiction other than this state, and just striking out, or a person that is acting as an assuming insurer for a licensee domiciled in this state. Then in section 3, this section has to do with a license, getting a license to actually offer insurance if the application is denied. That's what's being amended here. And it talks about in subdivision A, what's returned to the applicant if their application is denied. And so really just a clarification, because what's returned is not any amounts paid for the applicable bond requirement, it's the actual bond itself. So it's just clarifying that. And then further specifying if there are any amounts that are paid toward the applicable license fee, that then again, that is also returned to the applicant. Again, if they're denied a license or it's not granted. Section 4, this pertains to debt adjusters and just some really very technical amendments. You'll see on page 3, this is for cancellation of the debt adjustment contract. Line 6 on page 3, it specifies that to cancel the debt adjustment contract, you have to mail or deliver, which is getting rid of that language and simply saying return in whatever form. A signed and dated copy of the cancellation notice or any other written notice. And then it's, kind of antiquated language, or send a telegram. Now it just says using first class mail or email. So updating some other provisions.
Okay.
So section 5, which is on the bottom of page 3, this concerns, this is deposits. I have to actually look that up and remind myself because it has been quite a while. If you recall, Emily, would you jump in, please?
This is to codify an existing department interpretation about the allowable interest rate limit in the limited circumstances in which a lender can have a deposit as the precondition of a loan. So we interpret that to mean that it can't exceed our existing interest rate limitations that are contained elsewhere in law.
So I wish you had taken longer to say that because I was just looking up the next one because I can't remember what that one is off the top of my head.
Maria, do you want me? I have a section by section summary.
Fine. Yeah, why don't you come up and
come sit?
That's perfect.
Can we get that too?
Yes, I believe you have it, but I will resend it.
It may, check the website. If not, if it gets sent to Jill, we'll get it out.
It was from earlier this month, but I'll send it so that it can get posted to
Okay,
your
it's
page
probably
today.
up on the last time we took this bill up, so we'll find it and repost.
So if I can also.
So I don't have to do all these notes.
No, don't do the notes.
Okay.
I'll help you out with that.
The next one is starting on page line 11 of page 4. This is regarding confidentiality for property and casualty filings. Currently, we're not able to designate supporting documentation as confidential. We are able to do so on the life and health side. So this would allow insurers to request confidential treatment for those materials that go along with their rate and review filings. And ultimately, we think that this will give us the ability to do more robust reviews because we'll be able to take those documents and look at them in more detail, whereas currently sometimes we have to review them over WebEx and things like that because there's sensitivity around whether it would be subject to public disclosure when it may in fact be a trade secret. So again, it's just adding the word non-proprietary there. Section 7 is changing from 45 to 90 days the time frame in which an insurer shall provide notice to policyholders of an approved long-term care rate increase. And so this, this will give further actual notice of an approved rate increase. We plan to couple that with a repeal of a bulletin, which currently provides that insurers must provide notice of a requested rate increase. This isn't a statutory change, but that bulletin, while intended to provide better public awareness of rate increase requests, have led to confusion because the actual rate approval happens months later and it's usually in a lower than requested amount.
So right now, who you send out a notice of an application for rate increase, or does the
Insurers.
The insurance company that sends it out?
So pursuant to our bulletin, insurers are providing a notice of a requested rate increase.
Okay,
And
and
then
this,
by statute, 45 days before an approved rate increase. We're wanting to extend the timeline for notice of an approved rate increase because we think it'll allow for more meaningful decision-making because that's the rate increase you're actually going to be facing. Whereas the requested rate increase is not necessarily.
okay, so you could cause panic if you get a thing that says your long-term care is going up 300%.
Correct.
And you then, okay, but then you only approve 90%. If I panic, I might cancel my insurance based on the 300, or I might switch to a less expensive, less beneficial policy. Whereas when the final rate is approved, 90 days gives me time to make a decision about canceling, changing, whatever, based on the real facts, not the possible facts.
Exactly.
Some of us are getting familiar with possible facts and rate increases. Okay.
So the next section is a repeal in section 8 of the existing Life and Health Guarantee Association chapter and replacing it with a strike all replacement. This is to adopt the NAIC model law that is designed to protect long-term care insurance policyholders from losses due to company insolvencies. This NAIC model was adopted in 2017. These revisions would broaden the assessment base for insolvencies to include both life and health insurers and to split the assessments 50-50 between the two industries. It also provides for the inclusion of HMOs as members of the Guarantee Association and excludes nonprofit hospital service corporations. There's also several technical amendments throughout. At least 34 other states have already adopted this model. It is very technical and lengthy, but we adhered closely to the NAIC model language. There are a few deviations from it, primarily to align existing law, that chapters that are being repealed with the model language. And then as Maria had mentioned, there are a few tweaks that we've been working on together, mostly to conform to drafting conventions.
Okay, so right now, long-term care is probably where you're seeing the most shakiness in the insurance market. That's where you've been seeing the big rate increases. So this would combine all your insurance policies into the guaranteed fund. I heard you say it adds long-term care and HMOs.
It adds HMOs. Emily, can I?
Yeah, I can take this one. So the current, Emily Brown for DFR, the current guarantee association law already includes long-term care. What these changes do is splits the obligation of member insurers to cover those long-term care insolvencies. But now what used to be it was only on health insurers who are members of the Guarantee Association. And now what it does is it adds life insurers to that. So they're actually splitting the obligation if any future long-term care insurers become insolvent or unable to pay claims. The piece about the HMOs is that currently in our current law, we have a separate statute which kind of has a trigger for setting up a separate guarantee fund for HMOs. And what the NEIC model has done is actually gets rid of that separate HMO guarantee association and combines it with the life and health guarantee association that is in our statute. So it's kind of putting those two, adding HMOs as member insurers to our existing life and health guarantee association. And then the other change that Emily mentioned was it specifically excludes the nonprofit hospital service corporations from being members of the Guarantee Association, which means that if there's an insolvency, like a long-term care insolvency, for instance, they would not be required to pay into that fund to cover those policy expenses.
Okay, right now, there's a guarantee fund.
Correct.
And you have a life health. Right now, life and health insurance are all in one fund.
Correct.
And long-term care is included in that fund.
Yes.
Now you're adding HMOs to that fund. So we now essentially have one big guaranteed fund, which I assume is a larger pool, which in insurance is usually a good thing, to spread the losses across. So this is good. The independent hospital or healthcare. So if I have long-term care insurance and I'm in a nursing home and the nursing home goes bankrupt, what are we adding in that last instant? What?
So the only thing that the Guarantee Association would cover was not if the nursing home went bankrupt, but it would cover if your insurer covering your nursing home expenses went bankrupt.
Okay.
So it's not affecting anything having to do with provider care or provider organizations.
So
this is all having to do with insurance.
But my long-term care goes bankrupt. The guarantee fund now does what for me as a consumer?
So what it will do is if your insurer, which you purchase long-term care insurance from, can no longer pay your claims,
right,
the Guarantee Association steps in and pays those claims for you up to, I think in our statutes, up to $300,000. So essentially provide you coverage that is that is supplemental, or not supplemental is the wrong word, but replaces the coverage you had with your insurance company that can no longer pay claims.
Right. Is that a change?
No, that is not a change. That existed prior to that,
Okay.
prior to these
So we aren't
recommendations.
changing anything here.
What we're changing is just the way that those claims are paid for by insurers,
Okay,
or which insurers are paying for those rather is the better way to say it. So
it's the big-
previously it was just the health insurers paying for it. And now what the model law is saying, it is more fair to have both life insurers and health insurers pay.
Okay, so so the long-term care is in the health guarantee pool, but not the life guarantee pool. So we have merged the two pools to cover long-term care or to cover all guarantees.
Nope, this change is just specific to long-term care. And just the historical context is that most long-term care is written by life insurers. So the way that the statute currently exists is that the burden is put on the health insurers to pay for an insolvency. So this was kind of a compromise position that the NEIC facilitated in its model.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Next, we can't have been through 71 pages.
It's actually, I think Deputy Commissioner Brown did a great job explaining the
Yeah.
merging of the
The two.
two subchapters into basically
So there were
one
two
chapter. So
subchapters,
it's not-
one, yeah,
there aren't a lot of substantive changes. They just accomplish that purpose.
Right.
So there are references, in the appropriate sections.
yeah.
To the life insurance companies and then also the health maintenance organizations, which were separate. So
That's the last.
and that's the last section. So I don't know if you
That's the last
actually,
section.
yeah, so it's all
All
just
of this.
that merging. And again, it's not substantively, other than what Emily just explained.
Okay. Okay. And that's it for the bill. All right. We will hear from the bankruptcy experts, probably next Wednesday or Thursday, whenever we get them in. And committee, any questions? Yes, I want you. I lost you. You were over there. Yes, Michael, I'm sorry. I was on the agenda. Okay.
I'm here at 3:15 on Friday. I'm gonna let you move on without me.
No,
Um,
especially since I invited you.
So Mike Fisher, healthcare advocate. Let me first say, this is not my area of focus. Healthcare advocate's office has got a bunch of duties to focus on healthcare, health insurance. And the issue that I'm here to mention is fully outside of my area. Though I had a conversation with the chair and she thought it made sense for me to come and make a very simple point. And so this is about, I think, section 7 of the bill, and maybe more appropriately about the bulletin that we just heard is going to be withdrawn or and
this is the long-term care rate increase.
this is about when it makes sense to notify people about a rate proposal, a rate decision. So the very simple point, I am very engaged in the topic of giving people, policyholders, notification about rate proposals in the area of healthcare. And so I'll focus there for a minute. My office spends a great deal of energy, along with the Green Mountain Care Board, giving people a heads up. Hey, your insurance company has proposed this rate. You have an opportunity to make comments to the decision maker, in this case, the Green Mountain Care Board, about that rate proposal. And then the Green Mountain Care Board, on whatever level, reviews those comments as a part of this decision-making process about the appropriateness of the rate. I heard a number, a month ago or something, when this committee went through this before, DFR talk about its process. around long-term care rates. I have no inside knowledge or about whether it's, good or fair, or I have no knowledge about it. But I did think it made sense to at least comment to the chair and now to the committee that the purpose of giving people that, just the very simple point, the purpose of giving people an opportunity to know about a rate proposal is so that they can comment. And not so that they can decide about whether they can still afford the insurance, but so they have an opportunity to comment. And so that's my very simple point that I wanted to make. I was involved in supporting a constituent, a member's constituent, in making this point, and it must have been in 2020, who asked then Commissioner Pieciak, in response to a 300% rate increase proposal, and this individual said, "Can you just notify me? That's all I'm asking." And I thought that was a fair request. And so helped that person express that to then Commissioner Pieciak. And as a result, I believe the bulletin that is proposed to be withdrawn was created. So.
Emily, I'm not gonna put you on the spot, unless you want to be. But we'll give you a chance to respond if whenever.
Sure.
And I just want to be perfectly clear, I'm not advocating one way or another on this one, I'm just recognizing.
It's just raising our awareness.
Yeah, and I think, and Emily, Deputy Commissioner Brown can speak in more detail. I think you're right that the bulletin was issued really to try to achieve that better notice. What we've found is that it has caused a lot more, concern or confusion, and perhaps not provided that meaningful notice of the actual change. And so when we're trying to balance, what can you expect in terms of a rate increase versus notice of a proposed one, we want to make sure that consumers are making informed decisions on what will actually happen. And so well-intentioned to provide that notice, our experience, I think, hasn't been that it has been as effective as we hoped. And that's why we want to provide, by statute, increased notice of an actual rate increase. So that's, Emily, if you have anything to add, but.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. And I agree, Emily Brown, DFR, I agree that I think if the rate increases that we were receiving were closer to what we're actually approving, then that would be more meaningful. But to Emily Kosicki's point, when people are seeing a notification of usually a 3-digit rate increase, the calls that we're getting and the calls that we have received since this bulletin went into place are a lot of panic. And then I think, not saying any rate increase for long-term care is good, but when people usually realize that the rate increase, instead of 100%, they're going to see 30%, there's a totally different conversation that we have and that they're able to have with their financial planner or their advisor, whoever that might be, or their family. So we really just want to provide, that the goal of the bulletin was to provide more transparency, but we're just trying to provide transparency, but in a more meaningful way, which again is the reasoning behind this suggested legislative change. And, just a few points, when we were thinking about this and thinking about it also in the context of, transparency and the public having an opportunity to comment, as Mike mentioned, I think, I've been involved with the public comment that the Green Mountain Care Board has for major medical rates. And I think there's a few differences in these types of products. One of the biggest ones is that these are voluntary products. You don't have to purchase a long-term care policy. And so it would be kind of, if we created any type of public comment, it would be kind of putting long-term care on a different plain as all other insurance that we review in the PNC and life and health world. And would also just make us an outlier among states as well. There aren't any other states. I believe there might be one that requires, I think it's quarterly public hearings. So again, we're trying to find balance with this suggestion. And then I think there's also definitely more that we are doing and trying to do on our website to make sure that when something is filed, that consumers can go to our website and see all of the information in real time and see, you know, the interactions we're having with companies. And so we're working on making that more transparent so that people can, you know, if they're wondering about if their insurer has filed a long-term care rate increase, they can go on our website, see the status, see if it's been approved. But again, we're just trying to make sure that any notification they're getting is based on actual information and not a number that might not be justified.
Okay, any questions? All right, 3:30 on Friday. Good time not to get questions. All right, we will hear from the DFR legal team, it sounds like, that handles bankruptcies. And if anybody has any proposals before that, let me know so I can let Emily and Maria know. But I think we will probably vote this out. DFR has been very good about just doing housekeeping. We haven't found Bruce's name stuck in there.
What was his name?
What? Pete the Moose, that's right. Got stuck in the budget. So, thank you. It's been a long week. I don't know, I keep waiting for the floodgates to open and the bills come in. I did the epinephrine, no copay is on. And I believe the Blue Cross was in, they said, well, they did, because of that actuarial balance, if we do this, we gotta raise it up here. And they said that they didn't have a problem with the epinephrine, but there were other bills out there that had bigger. I assume one might be the infertility bill. Apparently the Shield law had some big no copays in it. I think there is a no, I checked with Senator Lyons, there is a no copay for abortions, but Sarah said that wasn't a big deal, and she said that to them. But there was all transgender treatments were included, and that's been taken out of this bill altogether. So I think we can just do I did drop an email to Sarah and just said, let me know. So I think we can do that. I'm assuming we're going to do the wood boiler because I didn't hear any no's on that. And what was the third one? Wednesday, I'm going to be gone for a while to speak at a community forum. Senator McDonald will be doing he'll be running this ship all by himself. And I have to go down the line, and they told me Senator Bray was next in line, but I'm not sure how reliable his presence is. He's got another chair to run. I think my next chairs for committee members will be no chairs.
Bottom line, travel over.
No, I got chairs, they don't show up, so I don't. What chairs? Please.
Senator Brock has seniority on this debate.
He does.
I would defer to him.
He does. But, so we will.
You want me a favor?
We will do that. We're doing one other quick vote out on Wednesday. We've been moving stuff around.
On Wednesday, we just have that 60 local option tax.
Oh, that's the other one, 99.
Oh, yeah.
99 came today. Senator Chittenden it came over from transportation. I'm assuming there's a little fee adjustment or something in there. It should be a fairly quick pass through. I think local option tax we won't do when, because I'm not sure what time I'll get back, so we'll put that on Thursday, and then we've got one other thing to do, and I'm waiting, but my intention is we'll spend a good portion of time, perhaps we can get a walkthrough. They're gonna be working full-time on childcare, so I can't really walk through that. But we will try, do some work on that TIF and see what we're gonna, on Friday, we've got the Barrett TIF coming in on Thursday.
Hartford tip too, right?
Hartford is on Friday.
Yeah, there's one Thursday.
Yeah, so we'll either do or not do those TIF expansions. And then we will start working on the mini TIFs to see if we can get something together, because it's really too big to stick on miscellaneous tax, so I don't know that I'm gonna have to. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Everybody stay healthy.